All right, so we are really excited today to have our first interview with our experts in the field. And today we have Jennifer Jupp, the Children's Ministry Director at the Refinery Church in Columbus, Ohio, and Leah Whicker, the co-leader of 139 Kids Special Needs Ministry, also at the Refinery Church of Columbus. And one other thing, this is my church too. So I do help lead us with the 139 Kids with Leah, and we are super excited to talk to you today about what we've learned since Relaunch.
Yes.
So Jen, can you tell us a little bit about the Refinery?
Yeah, definitely. So we are a church in the suburbs of Columbus. Typically before COVID, BC, we had about 500 to 600 people on a Sunday and about 160 to 180 kids, birth through fifth grade in our ministry. And so that gives you an idea a little bit about the size of church that we are and the demographic that we serve.
Yeah. Leah, do you want to add a little bit about our special needs ministry?
Sure. So in addition to having the wonderful ministry that Jen heads up, we also accommodate kids that have special needs. So we invite them in as well, have their parents fill out an application just to give us a little background information about their child and their unique needs. And then we will accommodate those needs so that they can attend service.
So Jen, when did you guys have to stop meeting on site due to the pandemic?
So in our area, it was around the middle of March 13th, which was a Friday, is when we started getting announcements about things closing. So we made a decision really quickly to not open our doors that March 15th, 2020.
Yeah. And when did you decide to go ahead and try relaunching on site?
So we relaunched our church without a children's ministry in June, and then our children's ministry opened back up in August.
Mm-hmm. What did you do to kind of prepare for reopening, and how did you know when you were ready?
Well, when we were initially having just online only and the whole church was online, it was a little bit of a short-term, quick response. We just put together packets for kids. We tried to just do whatever we could to provide things for people at home. It got a little bit trickier once we had some families coming back to church on site and some families staying home. And that's been the balance that's been the trickiest to navigate.
What type of procedures did you add in? And did you add in any in the beginning that you realized needed to be changed after you started them?
The biggest things were masks or some sort of face covering for all adults across the board. That was just kind of a mandatory thing from the beginning. Later, we did end up adding masks for older children when things started to really pick up in our area. We started to see more cases. All of our people have had temperatures taken before they've come into our children's ministry, whether they're volunteers or kids. Hand washing, lots of hand washing, hand sanitizer everywhere, as you've seen most places that you've been now. But really, it was about communicating the importance of following those procedures and communicating those procedures really well to parents and volunteers so that everybody understood clearly what we were putting into place and knowing that we were going to continue to monitor as we go.
Can you tell us a little bit about how your program changed once you relaunched on site? Because I know only a percentage of your ministry partners or volunteers came back and a percentage of your students. So how did it look different than before?
Yeah, so for our general ministry, we were fortunate to be able to maintain, for the most part, a small group, large group format, which is what we had started before. And that's just simply because our facility, really allowed us to do that. We were able to kind of create table groups and then come together for a large group. We did have to change a little bit of our seating. We had little Velcro dots on the floor that are 6 feet apart. So we're helping kids navigate that social distancing, which is really, really tricky. And that's another thing I would say we did communicate to parents from the beginning is what we wouldn't be able to do. And that was to keep kids 6 feet apart. There's just, as anyone watching this probably knows, it's just not going to happen. And so parents at least knew that that was something that we realized we weren't going to be able to control. We would do our best. We choose activities that don't require them to come together and huddle in closely. But at some point we had to communicate what we wouldn't be able to do and allow parents to make that decision as well. So we were able to keep most of our Sunday morning experience about the same with a few small changes. But I think Leah can talk a little bit more specifically about a more dramatic change, which was in our 139 or social ministry.
Yeah, so Leah, I do want to hit on that because Jen, I think that you guys had to make some adaptations and be flexible and evaluate as you went, but basically you kind of stayed in the same format as before. Right. Whereas I know in our ministry, the special needs, we had to completely change everything because before the pandemic, we had about 25 volunteers. We had a buddy ministry. When we went back on site, we had 5 volunteers willing to come on site. So Leah, can you kind of talk to them about what we did and how we got there and what has happened since?
Sure. So we started the whole process by just bringing everybody into the discussion. So people that were comfortable coming for an on-site meeting were invited to do so. We put safety precautions in place, so it was a safe meeting. But we really wanted to hear from all of our volunteers to get an idea of what they had in mind, if they were comfortable serving at the church, what kind of safety precautions they would like to see. We also just got their ideas for ways to structure our program. And we have a lot of great volunteers that have wonderful backgrounds. Some of them have special education backgrounds, some of them have physical therapy backgrounds, things like that. So we wanted to get everybody's input to try to make it the best program that it could be. Even though it was going to look different, we wanted to get everybody's ideas up front. And so we compiled all of their ideas and came up with a great plan. And we decided instead of doing the buddy program where kids would go in and out of service and take breaks in our resource room when they needed that, we now just do a program where everyone's in the same classroom. And we've been able to structure it so that they're still learning a lot. They still have a lot of different activities in their morning routine, but it does look a little bit different than it did before.
Yeah, so I want to talk about that for just a minute because there's some really important points here. First, one thing when we've talked to other leaders across the nation who have already relaunched, the thing I hear over and over and over again is what you just said, Leah, is that this is not a time for leaders to say, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is a time for leaders to invite their people in and really listen. Because
absolutely,
we're all learning together, and some people may have really innovative ideas that they won't tell you unless you ask. And that's exactly, I think that's exactly what happened with us.
Yeah, I agree. Some people had just wonderful ideas that, you and I had brainstormed prior to meeting with everybody, and just we couldn't come up with all of the ideas that they had. It was vital that we had that collaboration with everybody. Yeah. And then I also think it's important for people to realize that as you're relaunching your ministry, you will have to make changes and adapt as you go. So just set that expectation up at the beginning. We are going to start out with this plan, but we're also going to collect information and see how it goes, and we're going to modify our plan as needed. And I think that empowers the ministry partners as well, because they feel like they can speak up and say, hey, this works great, but maybe we could change this aspect of our plan. And we've been able to do a few modifications that have made a big difference for the kids that we serve.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartly. I think another point of that is that when you involve at our church, we call them ministry partners. To everyone else, that's volunteers. But when you empower your volunteers to be part of the plans, it also helps give you buy-in with the families, because more people are on board and more people are sharing and saying, yes, this is the right decision. So I really felt like I can't stress this enough, had to completely change our entire special needs ministry to something radically different. And we would not have been able to do it without that team buy-in. All right, so Leah, can you tell us a little bit more about the changes that were made to our special needs ministry and how the kids are responding? What has been the impact?
So we went from having a buddy system where the kids were integrated more with our kids and going in and out of service and taking breaks as needed, to now being in the classroom full time. And so that's been a big change for them, but they've done really well. They've been able to transition well to the new program. I think providing a social story for the kids and communicating that to the parents ahead of time, giving them the opportunity to explain what was going to happen, what the new format would look like, was very beneficial for those kids. And so the transition has been really smooth. Now, instead of the kids doing small group time in the large our kids area, they spend their time learning in a group in our classroom. And so what we have done is we created some small group time where all the kids will come together and they'll learn a lesson, they'll watch a Bible story. But we also have a time where they can share how they're feeling, and we try to build community in the classroom as well. And then when we break out and we do some other activities, we want the kids to learn a memory verse every month, which is what all of the kids are doing at church. So they get to do some fun interactive activities to learn the Bible verse. And then we also allow them to have a time for a short break, because we know that we don't want to overwhelm their schedule. We want them to have some time to decompress. And then we also incorporate an activity so that they can reinforce what they learned during the lesson time.
What I wanted to say about that was, when we went into this change, I kind of went into it with the attitude that we have to make this change. This is something we need to do, not necessarily something that I really want to do. But what I learned was there were so many wins in it that I had not realized. We have learned that the best way we can run our ministry after the pandemic is over is that we want to have a special needs ministry classroom for the kids that fits, and then add the buddy program back in for other kids. So I would just encourage people that you're going to learn so many things in this time that you're going to be able to carry with you into the future. Jen, do you have any wins you want to add from your ministry?
Yeah, I would just say definitely our special needs ministry, I felt like, was the most impacted and had the most pivotal kind of shift to make, and had a huge win there. So that's been our overall win. We've had a lot of, when you were talking earlier about getting buy-in from your ministry partners, your volunteers, and including them in the process, I would also say that another win for us was we actually, as an overall children's ministry, I reached out to our oldest kids in the ministry. That would be our 5th graders at our church. And I had a Zoom call with them in the spring. I think it was in May. And I asked them, you know, when you come back to church, what is it you would like church to look like? What do you think the kids at our church want it to be? Do you want to talk about what's going on? Do you just want to get back to what we used to do? Like, how do you want to do that? And so bringing some of the kids and some of the parents into that conversation was also a big win for us. We just in general have been just flooded with so much grace, and even the few times that we haven't been able to offer every single thing that we would like to offer on a Sunday morning, we've just had so much grace given by parents and families and kids. And, you know, just everybody just wants so badly to be back at church, and they realize that we are working really hard to make that happen. And so that's been a huge win for us as well. Just, you know, getting everybody on the same page. And it's kind of that, we're all in this together mentality, which I know has been stated over and over again, but I think that's kind of leveled the playing field in this particular pandemic situation that we're in. Everybody's experiencing it on some level, literally everybody in the world. So everybody has been full of grace and understanding that just some things we just can't make happen. Whereas if we had wanted to close a room or not have children's ministry on a Sunday before the pandemic, that would have been received very differently from our families. So that's another thing I think we really learned along the way, but it's also been a win for us.
Yeah. So Jen, can you expand on that just a little bit from a leader's point of view? I know there was a couple Sundays you were not able to offer all your rooms or offer children's ministry. What did that feel like as a leader, and what did you learn from that? What could you tell other people?
Yeah, so we were super fortunate that we were able to make it happen almost really every Sunday until we had the holidays. And then around the holidays, a lot of people started to, want to be home more so that they could see their families and things like that. And so we, of course, were fine, with that. And that's another thing that we said from the beginning was we understand that every family is making a decision that they need to make for themselves. And so we didn't want to shame anybody or make anybody feel bad if they weren't serving. And there came a time where we did have to close a room or not offer a room on a Sunday. And that first Sunday was pretty hard for me. But I, as a leader, realized that I would set the tone for that. And so I helped our team remember that we have accomplished really a pretty amazing thing by being able to offer every single room, every single Sunday since our church opened its doors. And it's okay that we can't. We said from the beginning that we would do the best we could, but we didn't make any promises that we would do that. So I would say the hardest part for me was that one Sunday, a little boy walked in when he comes to church with his grandma, and he didn't have a spot that morning. And I couldn't make it work even in the morning of. Usually we can make it work, and we just couldn't. And he was like, I really want to go to my classroom. And I'm like, I know, buddy, I'm so sorry. And that's hard to look a child in the face and tell them that they can't be in their classroom. But at the same time, I love that he wanted to be in there so badly, that, it was such a good, that trumped that a little bit, and helped us. I make sure he got in the next week, for sure. He was in the first one in the room, signed up. But that as a leader, I think it's important to remember that you set the tone. And so you have to rally yourself and get past your own emotions and your own things that you're struggling with from a leadership perspective, and help your team remember the vision and why they're serving. Because if you are reopening your children's ministry, the people who are serving in person are going to be giving a lot. And they're going to be giving way more than they probably ever have given before. And it's really important that you, as a leader, remind them of not only the importance of their vision, but how much you recognize that they're doing that. And we've done hopefully a good job. Certainly we tried hard to have lots of coffee and snacks and a time of training and huddling and praying together before we serve, and really making that a priority in our ministry.
Yeah, I want to add into that as someone who serves in the ministry. You have done a great job at that. I think myself and everyone on the team feel appreciated. I always appreciate free coffee. But honestly, just having that huddle time in the morning, it really is something I would encourage every church to think about. And this is where you invite your volunteers to huddle together before you serve, because it just gives you time to kind of hit the high points, even talk about some of the new procedures as reminders, but also that prayer time. There's something really powerful about praying together before you serve. So 2 thumbs up on that, Jen. You're doing a great job.
And I would also encourage leaders who've maybe not had success with getting their team together before services, which we have certainly struggled with that, especially because we have 2 services on a Sunday. And so especially that second one. But this is a time when people will make that a priority because they realize that you have important information to give them right before they serve. And that's changing weekly. And so we had more buy-in with huddle time and more participation and getting people here earlier for that huddle time since we reopened, because there was a real value for them in it, in getting the information and coffee.
That's right. So let's talk about another thing that every church is struggling with right now, and that is the hybrid model. Because we all have students and volunteers that are on site and some at home. Jen, can you talk a little bit about how you approach that with the students that are at home?
Yeah, so we are right now in that position of really taking what we thought would be a short-term plan, and now we're creating a long-term strategy, because in our area, it looks like this is the way it's going to be for a while. For lots of reasons, people are not worshiping on site. And so we recognize that people will not only continue to make that choice for their families, but then this is now an option for kids or families who maybe wake up and somebody's sick that morning, or for whatever reason, temporarily, maybe they're on vacation or whatever. We needed a long-term strategy for really doing both things well. And so right now we're working on that and developing that, and realizing that there are some things that we can put into place pretty quickly. Things like communicating with the families who are at home, sending postcards, like just saying we miss you or happy birthday or whatever it is. And then some other things that we've gotten from some feedback from some of our families who are worshiping from home, to create a small group Sunday morning experience with their small group leaders via Zoom. Surprisingly, we had a lot of families really want that, which I was thinking everybody was done with Zoom and didn't want another Zoom call, but I think we've all kind of settled into that as a new normal. And so we've had a lot more requests for that kind of thing. And so I would just encourage leaders to not necessarily just keep doing what you were doing, because now what you need is a long-term plan. And really you have a couple of different things to consider with your people who are online. You're going to have the people who are choosing that for maybe a period of time, but you're also going to have some spur of the moment kind of people, like I said, that wake up sick, but also realizing that I think the future of our church is that people will find us online first. They will check us out online first. They will watch sermons and worship services online before they'll ever step foot in the building. And so really taking advantage of that, that platform of providing an online option for families, but thinking through it through a lot of different perspectives is going to be really important.
I agree with that. And I would just add to that, you really need to look at what you need to do from your own ministry objective. So I know one thing that Jen and I have talked about recently is how to engage our students at home and what do they need from us. And we found that the general children's ministry need and the special needs ministry needs were different. And so I just encourage you to really think through what works for you. So what we learned with our special needs ministry is we had been told by some of our parents they didn't want more Zoom calls because it's a little bit more labor intensive for our parents of kids who have disabilities. So we kind of had to ask ourselves, what is it that they really need? Because up to this point, we've been sending out videos and saying hello to the kids that are worshiping at home. But what we realized was we're probably never going back to the way things were, any of us. And so now we kind of have to ask ourselves, where do we go from here? And when it comes to the online content and our hybrid, what do we do now that really is engaging, not just for the kids that are worshiping from home from our church, but from any children? Because now with online content, you can reach, as many kids as people share it with. So I know one of the things that Leah and I have been talking about was really thinking outside the box and inviting some of our volunteers in to help us create content for kids who have special needs, who learn differently. And we haven't started this yet, but I just want to encourage all of you out there that this is really an exciting time to start planning and trying new things. Can either of you kind of tell us your experience with how you're engaging your volunteers who are at home?
Yeah, Leah, can you share a little bit about the prayer ministry?
Sure, I'd love to. One thing that Jen shared earlier that I just want to say again is it's so important to make sure that ministry partners know that the leaders respect their wishes to either serve in person or do other things that aren't necessarily on site, but just to make sure that everybody knows that, we love and appreciate all of our volunteers and we want them to feel like they're still a part of the ministry in some way. And we were really fortunate in the 139 Kids ministry to have a couple of our ministry partners reach out and say that they wanted to start a prayer ministry. And so it has been a huge blessing and something that we really wouldn't have expected. But they collect prayer requests throughout the month from all of the ministry partners that serve in 139 Kids. And then they also send out encouraging letters and notes at least once a month. And I've heard feedback from some of the ministry partners that aren't able to serve right now in church. And they've said what a blessing it is to them. They feel so much more connected to the church just because they hear from someone monthly. They know that they are being prayed for. And it's just a great way to engage ministry partners and give them an important role in the ministry, even though they can't necessarily serve at the church right now.
Yeah, I just say that prayer ministry has been a game changer.
Yeah.
I've heard the same thing as Leah, that people, it makes them feel like they're not lost. They haven't just been lost in the crowd. They're still part of the church and they know they're still cared for. And for me, I get that card every month, and every month I'm like, it makes my day. They're like, I've been praying for you and God bless what you do. I'm like, thanks. Like, it's so nice. And this is something too, one of the things that we're all kind of facing, well, a lot of churches are facing, is we may have less money coming in than before. So budgets are being cut. And I've heard a lot of leaders talk about, how do we reach out to people at home and let's send these gift baskets and let's do these things. But a lot of churches aren't going to have the budget for that. And I just want to encourage you, you don't have to. It's really about connection and making people know that you remember them and love them. And a phone call, a text, or a card is just perfect for that.
Yeah, I would add that in our experience, focusing on the relationship and the connection piece was way more important than providing a packet of activities. And so I know early on there were some times where I just drove to somebody's house and dropped off just, a $5 card game, for something for them to do as a family. But it was just the fact that I went to their house, said hello, how are you doing, checking in, really giving in a different way of your time is really important right now. And I would also just add that sometimes there are things that we wanted to do in our ministries that we haven't acted on. And this is a good time to take advantage of some of those things that may seem like small things, but now you have a whole group of people who can do those things and want to be engaged. And so just making a phone call, asking them how they're doing, just sometimes just getting the conversation going. Well, they'll most likely say, how can I help? What can I do? I want to do something. Have some things they can do. Send them a list of kids and their birthdays for the month of, February or March or whatever, whenever you're watching this in the next couple of months, and have them send something out. There are so many things that can be done now with these people who they want to serve and they want to give in some way. And the first time I did that, the person responded, "Thank you for letting me serve." And I was like, okay, I have missed it for the past few months, that I haven't engaged them and they want to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can either of you tell me what the biggest thing you learned has been so far? Jen, I see your face.
I have learned, oh my word, a lot. But I think the one thing that I've learned the most is that it will be okay. When we really do all the right things and we put all the things in place, if we really think through how we're doing what we're doing and why we're doing it, start with why. Why do we want to do this? And really get focused in and clear on that, and then bringing in people. As a leader, the hardest thing for me to learn is to not do it all myself. I want to do it all myself. That's just the kind of person I am. But as Leah mentioned earlier, there are so many ideas that have come out in this time that I would have never come up with on my own. And so bringing people into the conversation and putting a good plan together in place and communicating it well. That is another huge, huge piece. It's just communication. But knowing and trusting in God, and it will be okay. God will provide for your ministry, and it's our job to do our best that we can and to bring people around us, but to really just trust that He will provide for us and He'll make it happen.
What about you, Leah?
I would echo what Jen said, and definitely communication is huge. You want to make sure that you're communicating constantly with the ministry partners, with parents, just make sure that everybody is on board, knows exactly what's going on, being completely honest, because you aren't going to be able to do everything that you did before. So just being honest and open with that from the beginning, I think is very, very important. And then just realizing that you're going to set plans and you're going to have to change those plans. Like, things aren't going to always go exactly how you expect them to go, and that's okay. And that's part of that communication piece. You want to make sure that you have that open line of communication from the beginning, so that way when you do have to modify your plans, you can just let the parents know or let the ministry partners know, and just kind of make it a fluid thing moving forward. Then I think that benefits the kids a lot, and it benefits the ministry partners too, because they know exactly what to expect.
Mm-hmm. I agree with both of those, and I would just add in, I've learned this is really the biggest time to give yourself grace and to give others grace. Because it is a time of we're experimenting, and we're going to get some of it right, we're going to get some of it wrong. But I have just really celebrated the fact that no one's looking for perfection anymore. That's not what they want right now, which is good because we can't give it. Exactly. and just enjoy that piece, because I'm hoping this will be a culture change for the church too, where we become a church that's truly graceful, not just for others, but also for ourselves. So, Jen, I have one more thing I wanted to ask you. We had talked a little bit earlier about what you saw as the future for the Big C Church, and I really liked what you had to say. Can you share that, please?
Yeah, I know I'm probably in the minority here, but I look back at 2020 and I just I saw God moving in so many cool and unique ways that would have never happened had everything just gone as status quo before that. And so just reflecting back on the year and thinking of what the future holds, and having read the book Reappearing Church, which if you've never read that, it's a great read. But I was just reminded that, there are some people who are going to probably step away from the church, and there are going to be some people who feel disconnected, and we will work on that, and we will work on bringing them back. But the core of the people who remain are going to be the ones who are going to spark a revival. And I just believe that now more than ever, clearly the world was not ready to meet its maker when this happened, because people were just, freaking out. And so I just think that we are witnessing a revival, and we maybe can't see it because we're in it. But I think the core of the church, the people who are deeply invested and who are showing up in whatever way, whether it's at home or in person or whatever, the people who are still invested are going to be sparking a revival. And I am excited to see what's going to happen, because I think that people are going to find their way back to church in a really unique way that we haven't really seen in a long time.
I agree 100%.
Stay encouraged, be smart, make good plans, but just trust that God will continue to support you as a leader, and stay in prayer about that. Bring people around you, invite people to pray for you in your ministry. Give them some really specific things to pray about. And I think God's going to move in some really unique ways.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jen, and thank you, Leah, for joining us today. I think you guys have had a lot of great things to share we can learn from. And if you're watching this out there and you have more questions for Jen or Leah, please feel free to ask them through our Wonderful Works discussion group. And we're here for you. So thanks a lot, everyone.